I'm Shelby Williams from Plano City Council. It's nearly midnight and I have two exciting announcements. First and most importantly, Councilwoman Lily Bao has announced her candidacy for mayor of Plano. The election is on May 1st and I will be supporting Lily Bao. She is a tiger who is going to make sure that the people of Plano are represented every moment of every day. This is exciting news. Second, somebody asked me to resign. That's how you know you've made the big time. I'm in the prestigious company of Ted Cruz. Guy calls in during comments of public interest and demands that I resign. Took, I don't know, about a dozen fragments of things I've written over the past couple of weeks and lays them out one at a time, spinning this creative story about how I called for violence at the Capitol. I demanded an insurrection, words to that effect. It is all, of course, a lie. I condemn the violence at the Capitol. I condemn the riots. I explicitly called for everybody who invaded the Capitol to be arrested and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And I urged them to turn back when I saw that they had entered the Capitol. I know that was kind of silly because nobody there was watching their Facebook feeds at the time, but still. So there's a saying, the flak only gets heavy when you're over the target. So this guy called in and took his 3 minutes to piece together little tiny fragments of what I've written. I've written quite a bit over the past couple of weeks, and spins this story that I'm calling for violence. There's a word for when you deliberately deceive and manipulate the public to further your own ends. It's evil. Unfortunately, there's a lot of it these days. But you don't have to take my word for it. All of my stuff is publicly available on my blog at shelbyhwilliams.org/blog. It's all there. You can judge it and read for yourself. Now, let's move into the council content. We started the preliminary open with the interim appointment for Cultural Affairs Committee and the Tax Increment Financing Reinvestment Zone 2, numbers 2 and 3 boards. That's exciting stuff. We'll say that 3 times real fast. Then we moved into a discussion about the litigation with the City of Plano versus Edukid. This is also the Montessori Children's House. You may recognize this as the eminent domain case for the Parks Bike Trail. Now, there's a lot of history behind this. Very long story short, this case has been going on for years and years, well before my time on council. In the past year and a half that I've been on council, it's come up a number of times, but because it's in litigation, it's in executive session, and I have to be very tight-lipped about it out in public. I can't tell people who weren't in executive session about what was said in executive session under the Texas Open Meetings Act. However, council can and did today determine to waive a little bit of that to reveal some key details, which had been hitherto unknown to the public. So the County Commissioner's Court, when we had gone through with the eminent domain case, it's called condemnation. That is not the same as condemning a building to be destroyed. This is eminent domain. There was a bit of land which she already didn't contest, said, here you go, took the money, so that we could build the bike trail through it. The city could build the bike trail connecting a pretty long bike network. And so there's another parcel of land that's at issue now. The County Commissioner's Court had determined the fair value of that bit of land at $28,000, thereabouts. The owner of the Montessori Children's House is currently asking for either $1 million or $2 million, depending on the scenario that gets put forth. So $28,000 versus up to $2 million. There's a huge disparity there, and you got to ask why. So that's fact number one. Fact number two is that when the zoning request was first granted back in 2005, almost 16 years ago, the plans for development included the bike trail. That was planned back in the 80s. So everybody around there knew this would be coming, and that was part of the zoning. Now, here's the rub. the development that the owner of the Montessori Children's House had planned back in 2005 was always going to be subject to the bike trail, and once she started development, the development that she at some future point intended to undertake, she would have had to gift that land at no cost to the city regardless. So because she never sought development, that hasn't happened. She hasn't had to gift it unless there is development. I don't know how the mechanics of that work, but that was established back in 2005. So fast forward to today, no development has taken place. The only recourse the city has had is either to negotiate with the owner for the purchase of that land or go through the condemnation process to get the piece of land that would have to be given freely to us anyway if she were to develop on that land. My understanding coming into this late in the game is that the resistance has been because if we took the sliver of land, then she could not develop. So the fact that that land was always going to have to be given changes things a little. Third, I should say. There's been a relatively recent development in this case with concern about safety of the children. Now, that is, of course, a paramount concern. However, the owner of Montessori Children's House willingly took the money for the other piece of land that was going to be used to build the exact same bike trail. A lot of people are portraying it as though if there is a bike trail there, it's going to become a hotbed for crime. There was no issue with that concern when she took the money for the other bit of land. There's some people suggesting that if the bike trail was built, then the underpass that would go under Hedgecoats would become a haven for drug deals, etc. That underpass is already there today. Third is the concern about strangers, and pedophiles keeps getting brought up, being able to see the children in the playground and snatch them over the fence. Two things. They can already see the children in the playground and snatch them over the fence. There's a public walkway, a sidewalk right there that is that offers almost no protection other than a small little metal fence with a playground right on the other side. So visibility, access, all of that already exists today. If you were to make the case that if the bike trail on the other side of that playground is where malicious people could gain cover, it's very easy to build a privacy fence there such that gaining access to the children or even visibility of the children would be completely ruled out. So we as a council met in executive session to determine whether we wanted to disclose these facts. Personally, for me, it's been frustrating because for the past year and a half, I'm learning all of this stuff, but I can't tell anybody. And I've got people coming to me just as spoke at the council meeting tonight and the last meeting in December. So I am, of course, as always, am happy to talk with anybody about anything which I am legally allowed to. So moving on from that, we had an update on the Comprehensive Plan Review Committee process. Chairman Doug Shockey gave an update. The issues, to nobody's surprise, hinge on density, future land use, growth and management, and these are the overarching issues. The majority of the policy work is complete for the comprehensive plan, the new one that's being developed. However, the issue of density has brought an impasse. So what has happened is 3 members of the committee who were actually suggested by the committee itself. This was an organic committee suggestion. I watched it unfold, though I couldn't finish watching the meeting when it was happening, so I wasn't sure at the time how it ended up. But the committee itself suggested that 3 of the influencers among the committee get together to iron out these differences. There will be a 4th mediator. My understanding, based on tonight, is that regular committee meetings for the Comprehensive Plan Review Committee, CPRC for short, have been suspended, pending the outcome of the subcommittee. Chairman Shockey feels that this overall effort, realistically, is going to run us through mid-May before we have a comprehensive plan. We do have the money left over for that. A little bit of a silver lining to 2020 was that we are underspent in the $1 million we allocated for this effort. And at our current run rate of about $50,000 a month, my calculations say we can run through June without having to reallocate additional funds. I don't want it to go any longer than is necessary, but as I've always said consistently, I want this done right more than I want it done quickly. And because we have a 75% voting threshold on the Comprehensive Plan Review Committee, the idea is that we create a plan that has the overwhelming support of our people. This is a citizen committee appointed by council and representative of the citizens of Plano. And if they can achieve a 75% consensus, then we're making great strides toward unity, which has been getting worse over the years. So they're going to come back. The budget is 64% through, by the way. I made that note. We're going to keep running until we're going to revisit this in late April to see what the progress is and then make our decision on the future of it. There will be a citizen survey sent out. Be on the lookout for that. We need everybody's voice about what you want the future Plano to look like. So the survey is going to be open for about 2 weeks, so stay tuned for that. We then moved into the street bond referendum presentation. We have in Plano, here's some interesting facts. We have in Plano about $3.8 billion with a B of infrastructure, roadways, alleys, major arteries, etc. We have 1,194 lane miles, that's each lane, not the entire stretch of road, for major divided roads, and 1,484 lane miles of 2-lane residential streets. Now that's a total of, I'm not going to do that math in my head, I did it earlier. It's the exact distance from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles. It's off only by 2 miles, so it depends on where in the cities you take that measurement from. So, fun fact. For the bond referendum, I'm going to preface this. The bond referendum that's coming up on May 1st, Council has not yet voted to see what's going to go on the bond referendum. That's going to be the next meeting on January 20th, which, as another weird fact, not necessarily fun, definitely not fun, but weird, January 25th will be my daughter's birthday, and that is a council meeting. The past 2, I have 3 daughters, the past 2 birthdays that the other 2 have had also fell on council meeting nights. So we're going to have a trifecta, 3 daughters in a row with birthdays that I have to be at a council meeting for. So not fun fact, but weird fact. But I digress. The entire bond proposals for public safety, streets, parks, facilities, etc., is $404 million. That is huge. That is by far the biggest bond referendum we've ever offered in Plano. Almost double the last biggest. Maybe not double, maybe 60, 70% more. Well, 70% more. Check my math later. So 237 million of that 404, that's almost 60% of the entire bond referendum. That's just roads. The reason for this is with enough lane miles to stretch from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, a lot of it was built out 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and the warranty's up, as I keep saying. It is in dire need of repair. So we've got to start making investments in that. It is much less expensive to repair than to reconstruct road, as you might imagine. But we've got to balance it with our tax burden and how much debt we're issuing. So out of that 237 million in proposed street repairs, 180 million of it is considered high priority. That's a huge chunk. But I will say that what's being proposed in road bonds right now is just 6.2% of the value of our entire infrastructure. So this is something we got to get a handle on year after year. And as I noted in the meeting, if we had the flying cars we were promised 50 years ago, we wouldn't be in this mess. Now, reviewing the bond referendum projects, there are thresholds for what happens to your tax dollars. So you may hear every time bonds are introduced around Texas, this isn't going to affect your taxes. What they mean by that is if this particular bond passes, your tax rate will not go up as a direct and immediate result. You still pay for every dime. If you did not pass the bond, your tax rate would go down. So there are a couple of different levels here. If we pass $136 million worth of bonds out of 404, then there will be no property tax impact, meaning your property taxes will not go up. The current rate will stay the same. And we manage that by issuing new debt as old debt is paid off. So everything just kind of keeps an even keel. If none of these bonds were passed, then you would get a tax decrease of roughly, in aggregate over the whole city, the average taxpayer would get a tax decrease on their annual property taxes of $53.83. If we passed $350 million worth of the proposed bonds, the average annual tax burden would go up by $77.93. And if we passed every last bond proposal for all 404 million, then the average annual tax burden would go up by $100.55. So at the next council meeting on January 25th, council is going to discuss, debate, and prioritize and say which bonds do we want on the ballot and how much are they going to be and what is the potential tax impact. So tune into that council meeting. During March and April, city's going to be going on the road show to go around to HOAs, etc., and explain the ramifications of this. And then, of course, the election, along with the mayoral election, where I will be casting my vote for Lily Bao for mayor, is the bond election on May 1st. Then we had a discussion about the modification of the process for council proposing items for future agenda. Mayor LaRoselier brought this up. It hinged on revisiting items that had already been discussed. So where we came down is when there is an item that has been discussed by council but not acted on, or I guess whatever the disposition, even if it was acted on and some people thought it was a bad idea and wanted to revisit it. If it's something that had already been touched on, the council members who wanted to bring it back up would bring it up in preliminary open meeting, and maybe they've got a new angle on it. Maybe a couple months later, you're like, okay, I'd like to revisit this, but with a totally new approach. A good example of this would be the noise ordinance. We brought it up one time and didn't move forward on it. So went back to the drawing board, came up with a totally new structure for addressing it, then brought it up again. So council members could say, we want to revisit this, here's a new angle, or here's why I just want to relitigate the entire thing all over again. And if the council during preliminary open said, okay, that's fair, we'll explore it, then it would move forward to an item for future agenda. I did request that a time limit be set for that, like an expiration date for that rule. So like if a year has passed, then normal rules apply. Normal rules say any two council members can put anything on the agenda. Then we finally moved into the regular meeting. Item 1 was an SUP, specific use permit, for a private club for an existing restaurant, past 8-0. Item 2 was to extend the hours for a RaceTrac on the northeast side of Independence and Plano Parkway. Now, this had some resident opposition who submitted certified letters, like they were within 200 feet, I guess, or maybe 500 feet of the property. The change to the zoning here was to extend the hours of operation for the existing RaceTrac. Right now, it's limited under its SUP to operating between 5 a.m. and midnight. So the hours between midnight and 5 a.m. is not supposed to be operational. So they wanted to extend that to change from 19 hours a day to 24 hours a day, and only on that corner lot. So I measured the distance using Google Maps between the point of the RaceTrac where there might be any noise to the nearest house. There were about 4.5 lengths of an average house between them and a creek with trees screening it if you go in one direction, and a golden chick if you go in the other direction. So this ultimately passed. That additional operation between midnight and 5, the only potential real impact it might have on the neighbors were the lights at the time, as well as noise from large trucks making deliveries. So we passed by 8-0 the SUP with the stipulations that the RaceTrac has to provide suitable screening for the lights so that the glaring light doesn't go in through anybody's windows and impact the homeowners. And likewise, they can be operational between the hours of midnight and 5 a.m., but they cannot have any large trucks operating there at that time. You know, people driving through at 3 a.m. can come and get gas, things like that. Next, we made a change to the Cullen Creek property. The applicant had wanted, so there's 2,600 total units currently allotted. There are 2,300 multifamily apartments and 300 independent living units. Pardon me. So the applicant wanted to convert the 300 independent living units to more multifamily for a total of 2,600 multifamily. Staff recommended and council ultimately approved the ability to increase the independent living units as long as the total mix did not exceed 2,600, which is the current max total. So in other words, no additional multifamily. The applicant can, if it wishes, increase the ratio of independent living. A couple other changes that were part and parcel to all of this is they wanted to move the hotel and just change the nature of it after COVID. And they wanted to get rid of the superstore and the food truck, past 8-0. Next was the ordinance for the levy for the downtown Plano Public Improvement District, 15 cents per $100 of property valuation. The way a public improvement district works is you assess an additional property tax for the benefit of that district. So that's the downtown Plano Public Improvement District, PID. So in other words, the 15 cents per $100 of valuation that is being assessed for those folks is not going to go to the benefit of anybody in West Plano. That was, I think, the quickest item. That was over and done in a few minutes. Oh, no, just a couple of minutes. Actually, the next one, I think, was the quickest one. Item 5 was the final public hearing on the bond referendum, which we already discussed. That was the final public hearing, but like I said, the actual council decision is going to come next meeting. You can still speak. It's an agenda item. And then item 6, that was actually the last one. It was over and done because there were no speakers. Item 6, the extension of the city manager's Covet authority. Now, it's important to note that the extent of the city manager's authority is making staff decisions, meeting parameters, and emergency expenditures. It doesn't give the city manager authority to create new law. It's very narrow, and it all requires ratification by council. So when we first did this back in March of last year, we were in a very fluid situation, and we didn't know what the next day, let alone the next week, would bring. And so we granted the city manager this additional flexibility, not the ability to make law or rules, just process, procedure, etc. And to make emergency expenditures, all of which have to be ratified by council. That got renewed a couple of times. We renewed it again 3 months ago, hoping that we wouldn't need to remove it again, that things would be stable at the end of 2020. Ha! So now I personally voted in favor of extending it because we're entering a new area of uncertainty because of the vaccines. We don't know what shape that's going to take. By the way, Plano is now part of the Collin County wait list and the Denton County wait list, depending on which county you live in. So if you want the vaccine, go get on your respective county's wait list. And as Plano residents, we are included in that. But we don't know what's going to happen with the vaccine distribution. We still have to be able to roll with the punches, and we're probably a long ways off from business as usual. So with that, we approve that 8-0. Now, I want to make a note. This guy who tried to spin a fabricated story about me calling for insurrection, he signed up during comments of public interest. Every meeting, citizens can sign up, and you get generally 3 minutes to say whatever you like on whatever you like. So that's the avenue he used for this. If you're going to use that, don't lie. Seriously, don't lie. I mean, don't lie at all anyway, but don't lie. That's funny. Siri just activated when I said seriously. Siri, stop. Okay, I think we're back on now. Anyway, don't use the comments of public interest for that kind of abusive evil, I'll say it again, means. If you want to have a debate, that's what free speech is supposed to be about. If you want to have a debate with somebody, if you want to debate the ideas, do it. All my stuff is available publicly. I'm available publicly. I have a 100% meeting policy. I'm very open about this stuff. And I've invested years of my life with the Convention of States to explicitly, so that we could peaceably fix the issues with our country's government. Okay? I'm not the one calling for insurrection. So don't lie. And the reality is, he got on and said stuff like that because he's trying to cancel me. Millions of patriots are trying to be canceled right now. The purge has begun. Groups, conservative groups, are being taken down across social media platforms, just ghosted, canceled instantly. I mean, there's a reason that Parler was canceled, and it's not because they were using their platform to plan an insurrection. There was less happening on Parler to plan what happened at the Capitol. And by the way, again, I'll condemn what happened at the Capitol. That kind of lawlessness cannot be tolerated. So in case there's any misunderstanding from the yo-yos saying that I'm calling for an insurrection, that kind of lawlessness cannot be tolerated. But Parler was in no way complicit to planning an insurrection. It was and when it discovered stuff like that violated its terms of service, it got rid of the offending posts. Far more than Twitter has ever done. Lots of egregious stuff was planned on Twitter and Facebook last year in the riots of 2020, all across the country. Nobody cared about that. Okay? So this is a purge. It starts out with just silencing dissent and muting people. This only ever goes one place, folks. Seriously. So come back together, I urge you, before it's too late. Come back together and start talking instead of trying to cast political opponents as the devil, especially with out-and-out lies. So again, you don't have to take my word for it. All my stuff is public. Go to my blog or look at my stuff on Facebook. ShelbyHWilliams.org. Sign up. Read it all for yourself. Make your own judgment. That's what independent thought is supposed to be about. Good night and good luck.